Good evening to everybody, and welcome to tonight's 42nd Assembly District Candidate Forum, sponsored by the Lodi Optimist Club. We'd like to commence our meeting this week by asking everyone to please stand, and we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce our three candidates for office. To my immediate left is the Democratic candidate, Ann Groves Lloyd from Lodi. And to Ann's left is another Lodian, John Plummer, the Republican candidate. And to John's left is Gene Rubenstein. He's the independent candidate from Partyville. We'd like to thank the candidates for their attendance this evening. Our format will be as I think it's outlined on a sheet that most of you received. And if you didn't have one, there's some available here. Each candidate will have opening statements. We'll have opening statements of 2 minutes from each candidate, and then we will have questions from the audience. We ask that audience members, when they ask questions, be direct with their questions and also to identify themselves before making the question. Mr. Breinig is here in his track regalia to race around the room to provide a microphone to modulate your comments. So thank you, Vince. The timer this evening is my wife, Jan Haupt. She's in the front row, and she will indicate to the candidates with these cards when it's time to put an end to the discussion, if you would please. So without any further ado, I think we better call it just ado. We're past the early morning due time. Yes, and if you could please silence your cell phones. We'll be going for about an hour and 15 minutes this evening, so we'll give you another second or two to respond to that public plea. And we will now commence the forum with opening statements, and by alphabetical order, we'll begin with Ann Groves Lloyd for 2 minutes. Ann?
Thanks very much, Bill. I appreciate it. Use this?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all. I'm Ann Groves Lloyd. I want to first thank the Optimist Club for hosting us again this evening. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out to be here tonight. This is what a participatory democracy is all about. So it's wonderful to see you all here, and I thank you for taking the time and look forward to hearing your questions. So a little bit about me. Raised here in Lodi on our family farm, 5th generation. The farm is just north of Lodi. My mother was a middle school teacher here for 20 years, and my father worked at the University of Wisconsin, where he was a professor in the agricultural and applied economics department. His specialization was in co-ops, and I think that's where I really learned my love of grassroots and people being able to take control of some part of their lives. And in cooperatives cases, in many cases, it is about financial stability and being able to take some control of what people can in their daily lives. So the co-op education and my mom and dad's service in the community and just had always inspired me. I have been on city council I'm finishing up my 2nd term, and I'm just incredibly honored to be a part of this election. Representing this district would truly be a dream come true for me. And I'm just enjoying meeting the voters. It's been a fantastic journey, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions this evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Sure, John.
Well, good evening. I'd like to also thank Lodi Optimist for the invite tonight and Lodi High School for hosting. And Mr. Brining, you're giving up. You're off for the summer, aren't you?
No such thing.
No such thing. I'd like to thank all of you for showing up tonight. This is an awesome opportunity for you to get to know us better. My name is John Plummer. I was raised in Madison. Been married 40 years this fall to the best woman I've ever met in my life. And we raised 4 daughters, and they are all grown. We have currently 7 grandchildren. And the meat of my career has been working for Kraft Foods for 30 years. I was a route salesman, delivering to grocery stores and taverns and convenience stores. I retired from that in 2011, and my wife and I, during that time period, started teaching karate. I've been in martial arts most of my life. And in 2001, we bought our first karate school in DeForest. And we currently own the one here in Lodi, and now we franchise karate schools for our students who want to own their own business. I'm currently serving on the town board in the town of Lodi and the Columbia County board. I was elected to in April. I'm also honored to be in this process. I think the 42nd Assembly District is a perfect fit for me because it's made up of all small towns, and I can tell you personally, I know just about every street corner in every small town in this district right now. But the people are wonderful. I'm very excited to be able to represent them and looking forward to your questions tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gene Rubenstein. I'm running as an independent. I live in Partyville. I too would like to thank the Optimist Club for putting on this program, as well as the program we had a few weeks ago here with students involved. And I want to thank everybody for coming out and spending some time learning about the candidates. I'm running as an independent because so many of the people I speak with across the district feel that there is not a cohesiveness. We just did a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, one nation, indivisible. And it seems over the last few years on a local, state, and national level, it's one group pitted against the other group. And I think that's wrong. I think the labels have got to come off, and we got to look at ideas, what's best for the people in the district, not what is necessarily best for a Democratic Party or a Republican Party, but what's best for the people. I've chosen to live here. I'm the only candidate here who was not born in Wisconsin. I chose to live in Wisconsin. I was living in Florida, met someone from here, and it was easier for me to move up to Wisconsin than for her to come down to Florida. And that's why I'm here. So I've been here almost 13 years. We live in Partyville. We bought an old farmhouse that we redid. Before coming up here, I spent 18 years with a very large insurance company. Was involved with estate planning, business insurance planning, and personal financial planning. I was also a recruiting manager, and my philosophy about recruiting has always been if it had 2 heads, 7 legs, and was purple, if it was the best person for the job, that's who got hired. And a business person should be the most liberal of all of us because it doesn't matter what your skin color is, what your religion is, what your gender is. If you're the best person for the job, you should get the job. And that's always been my philosophy. So thanks for coming out tonight, and we're going to have some lively discussions. Thank you.
That concludes the opening statements from our candidates, and we will now entertain questions from audience members. Again, we ask you to identify yourselves and please be direct in terms of asking questions. Yes, sir. The first question will be directed initially to John, and then Jean, and then Ann.
Yeah, I'm John Wilson. I'm from the town of Dane. I wanted to ask about highway funding. Particularly, I'd like to hear the details. John Plummer's current advertisement talks about improving local roads without raising taxes. So I'd like to know how you're going to fund it going forward, knowing full well that we have billions of dollars of highway debt.
Well, clearly we have some work to do. I can tell you personally from driving around the district that we have work to do on our roads. In the town of Lodi, we're in a similar situation on a much smaller scale, and we were able to do that without raising taxes, just prioritizing. Clearly, the state is in a much different situation with many more miles of roads and bridges that need to be repaired. We are certainly going to have to look at increased revenue, and I believe that's going to either include gas tax, or registration fee increases, or both in some form, because we clearly have so much work to do on our roads that we need additional revenue to do so. I have been asked about tolling. I'm not a fan of tolls, primarily because of how important tourism is to our state. And the people that come up to the great state of Wisconsin to vacation, if we have an additional gas tax to pay for roads, are going to contribute to that anyway. So that's the plan that I'm looking for right now.
I think everybody agrees, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. I think we all agree the roads are in terrible condition. And so if we all use the roads, we all have to find some way to pay for the roads. And we can't put it all on one pot like a gas tax. I agree with John that we should look at an increase, a slight increase in the gas tax, plus an increase in some of the registration fees. We have cars now that are doing many more miles per gallon than when last the gas tax was adjusted. In addition, now we have electric cars, we have hybrid cars, we have whole fleets of buses and trucks that are using compressed natural gas, and they're not paying anything in gas tax. So we have to look at all the options to increase the revenue. Everybody uses the roads. Everybody's going to have to chip in a little bit if we want the roads to be fixed. And it's going to be, I think, a combination of everything.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a problem. We have a very serious problem. Just today, it was announced that a number of bridges have had their weight loads reduced for safety reasons, especially due to today's heavier farm equipment. For our local farmers, this can mean having to go miles out of your way to get back around to your fields if the bridge on the main drag will no longer hold the weight of your vehicle. We have to do something. I honestly don't want to back myself into a corner with any magic answer. I think every option ought to be on the table. This is a very complex issue, and it requires a well thought out, long-term, sustainable solution. So we are not every 2 years struggling to find money. Our infrastructure should be kept and maintained at a decent level, and we wouldn't have to be investing so much. Every day that goes by, we are paying more in debt service, and it's going to get worse. So we have some decisions to make. I want to listen to everybody. I want a lot of heads around the table, and I think together we can agree on some solutions to move forward, but we have a lot of work to do.
Next question directed initially to Gene Rubenstein.
Paul Westby City, Illinois. 5 or 6 years ago, the legislative leadership appointed a bipartisan group to do a study on transportation funding. The study was conducted. There were a lot of innovative ideas in it. It's gathered dust. 2 questions. One, how do you get that off the dust table and start looking at it? And 2, what percentage of the transportation budget should go to debt service in your opinion?
It's a very complex question. I don't think there's an easy answer. To dust it off, you have to pick it up and read it. And then take a look at what are the suggestions that are doable, and the ones that are not necessarily immediately doable, let's put out, that might be a lower priority. What has happened in the state, unfortunately, is that to balance budgets, there's been a lot of borrowing done, and not just in transportation. And just like any family with a credit card debt, you have to prioritize paying off that debt so that you can do other things. And if you're in debt real big with credit cards, you have to have a pretty good percentage of your income paying off that debt. So we have to look at paying off the debt, not just in the transportation budget, but other places where the state has borrowed money willy-nilly. And we have to look at raising additional revenue, not only for the debt service, but to fix the roads and to fix the bridges and fix the infrastructure that we need. We have to look at that study. I haven't read it, so I don't know what the good ideas or bad ideas are, or the usable or unusable. But if there has already been the study, let's look at what we can implement as quickly as possible, and let's look at what we can do to pay off the debt as soon as possible, just like any family would.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean. Yes, again, this is a complex solution or problem that's going to have to have some complex problem solving. I would be very interested in brushing the dust off that study. If it was a good study, we should absolutely revisit it and see what suggestions were on there, which ones are still viable today in today's context. And that can be used even as a starting point for conversations about moving forward. How much percent to debt service? You know, realistically, I hope we don't have any debt. Our taxpayer dollars will do a lot more if we're able to move through things debt-free and not have to worry about increasing debt load to our state taxpayers. That being said, sometimes borrowing is inevitable, and doing it in the smartest possible way with ideally short-term payoffs, so we're not building up long-term debt. This is about, for me, this is about the legacy we're leaving our children and our grandchildren, and that should not be a big debt that they have to dig out of.
Well, I think, Paul, you know none of us have read that study, but that was a trick question. I definitely think it's worth a read. I could tell you that of the hundreds and hundreds of people I've talked to on their front doorsteps, this is the number one thing they're concerned about. No question about it. Hands down, it's roads and infrastructure. I talked to some farmers today who were also concerned about the fact that there are some bridges they can't go over with their equipment. I'm not a big fan of borrowing money. At the town board meeting last night, we just voted to pay off our mortgage, our 10-year mortgage in 5 years. So I think through prudent spending, it can be done. But once again, we're going to need additional revenue. I think if they put the time into that study, it needs to be looked at, and I'm sure there are probably things in there that need to be implemented. But this is an issue we have to tackle. The economy is roaring right now, which means tax revenue is going to be up anyway. An additional revenue with whether it's gas tax or wheel tax or registration fees is only going to add to that pot of money to fix roads. So I don't think there's any question that everybody on this panel knows that this is an issue we have to deal with. But the study I would love to read.
Thanks, John.
Next question directed first to Ann Rosemary. Yes, sir.
One of the problems we have here, and we're not the only state, is that our districts have been gerrymandered. And whoever gets elected this time, 2 years from now, is going to be the cusp of the next gerrymandering exercise. So I want to know which candidates are going to stand up and say, we will not gerrymander Wisconsin.
Not only will I say we won't gerrymander, I would prefer to see the redistricting process put into a group of non-partisan folks who can take a look at the numbers, some statistical experts, some folks who can do this from a logical perspective without having to worry about re-election, without having to worry about figuring out a district that's going to work best for whomever is currently in that seat. I truly believe that this is a process that has to be in the hands of the people and not necessarily the hands of the elected officials who have a definite conflict of interest in redrawing those lines. So I would flat out say I will be no part of gerrymandering, but I hope that we can come up with a process that will ensure the integrity of redistricting every 10 years without anything like what has happened the last 8 years happening again in the history of our state.
Well, as I'm sure you're well aware, that is being decided by the courts as we speak. So, you know, however that lawsuit comes out will give us a lot of direction on where we go in the future. Both parties have been guilty of gerrymandering the districts. There's no question about that. I'm certainly open to other ways of redistricting, if, you know, when it comes to that. I will tell you this. I believe that regardless of the way a district leans one way or the other, if the people at the door or the people that vote for the assembly person believe that you are representing them the way you should be representing them, and they believe that you're looking out for them, I don't think it makes as much difference as you maybe think it does. I think, from what I can tell you, well, I can tell you from the people I've talked to that they just want somebody to represent them. And I've talked to people from both parties. They're very open to have somebody just go to Madison that's going to look out for them and represent the 42nd Assembly District. But once again, I'm open to ideas. But I think we need to wait for the court case to settle out, and we'll go from there.
You bring up a good point of why so many people in the district are disheartened with both parties, and maybe it's time for a change. The gerrymandering has been done by both parties, and there have been people probably in this room that are in one district, one election, another district, another election, and people don't like that. I would like to see a nonpartisan commission do it. That way, again, they don't have to be reelected, they don't have to worry about their political future, and they're somewhat shielded from the glare. Once it's done, it's done. Of course, like John said, it's going through the courts, but both parties have been guilty of this through the years. It's not a new phenomenon to have redistricting problems or issues. And the only way I think to settle it fairly is to have nonpartisan commission or committee or whatever you want to call it, put it together, and when their decision is done, of course, there's going to be a ton of lawsuits, and then the problems will be opened up from there. But I think the best way to do it is nonpartisan, because whether it be Democratic or Republican politicians doing it, they have an axe to grind, they have a conflict of interest. So I'm open for a commission to do it nonpartisan.
Next question directed initially to John Plummer. Please identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm Mark Davis. I come from Malville, and I think the question is relevant, maybe order of the dam, but Foxconn. And I'd like to hear folks discuss that because other opportunities or boondoggles, depending upon what you think of it, are going to be coming down the road in the future. So if you could talk about that decision and how you would be analyzing it should a similar decision come up in the next year or two.
Well, we've certainly fielded a lot of questions about Foxconn, and my understanding is that it's set up with trigger points that have to be met before money is dedicated to the project. The Foxconn deal, if I just turned the mic on, I think the mic was off this whole thing, has the potential to have enormous impact financially on the entire state. Not too long ago, I was over in Dodge County, and there's a John Deere factory over there that employs quite a few people in that area. What you'll notice if you drive around is there are satellite companies that surround it that supply that John Deere factory. So the ancillary potential for jobs, not only in that region but across the state, are enormous if all of the criteria are met. I think in future events you have to look at similar situation. Is it good for the state? Is it a good investment? Is the potential there? Are the safeguards there to protect our tax dollars? And I believe in the Foxconn case they are, because those trigger points have to be met.
I didn't get a flat screen TV. How about you? Anybody get one from Fox? No, I didn't get one. You got one from? No, okay. So we have to look in the 42nd district. How are we benefiting from it? And I don't think we're going to benefit that much from this deal. And as taxpayers, we're on the hook for over $200,000 per job created. I think that's an awful lot of money when we don't have money for roads, we don't have money for schools, we don't have money for higher education, we don't have money for the veterans, but we have money for a foreign corporation. Yes, it might be a big opportunity, but the cost of that opportunity of billions of dollars is tremendous. And what actually will end up happening is every other big company that is thinking about coming to Wisconsin is also going to want to get a few $1 billion of our tax dollars. You know, I think liberals and conservatives alike should be outraged that this much of taxpayer funding is going to a foreign corporation. I'm not getting a flat screen TV out of it, and I don't think you are either. So yes, there's a lot of people down in that area will have jobs. But if you look at the state right now, the state is spending over $1 million to attract people to come to Wisconsin because we don't have enough people for jobs right now. So if you have this big company sucking up 13,000 jobs, the small businesses around the state are going to get hurt, and the next big company that wants to come to Wisconsin is also going to want taxpayer dollars. Don't like it.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I have deep concerns about the Foxconn project. I agree that the 42nd is not going to benefit directly at all from this, and we are all the taxpayers going to be paying for this company. I have for the tax breaks. I have deep concerns about the environmental impact that this corporation is going to have. And I know there are benchmarks that are in the contract, but this company does not have a great track record, and this administration does not have a great track record for holding companies accountable to benchmarks. We've seen it time and time again with business loans that have gone out, and benchmarks have not been monitored, reports have not been filed. To rely on those benchmarks alone, it's deeply disconcerting. And the resources that are going to be diverted to that part of the state, resources that could be helping with our infrastructure, our education issues, I would not have voted for the Foxconn proposal. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Next question.
Directed first to Gene Rubenstein.
My name is Patty Herbert. I'm from Lodi. My question is a two-part question about education. First of all, what is your position on using our tax dollars for private schools rather than public education? And how will you address the issue of underfunding in public schools?
I've got to tell you a bias I have. My mom was a special ed teacher in Philadelphia. My aunt was a teacher in New York. My cousin was a teacher. My daughter is a chemistry and physics teacher in New Jersey, all in public schools. So I'll tell you my bias before I answer the question. Studies have been done on a lot of these quasi-government run private corporations, and they don't seem to have better outcomes than anything else. Why do we need 2 principals in one area, 2 guidance counselors in one area, 2 math teachers when they had 1 before? The funds should be made into improving public education. Public education, folks, is the bedrock, it's the foundation of the democracy in this country. When we left England, it was the rich and everybody else. And what these private corporations, whether it be for schools or for prisons or for roads, they haven't fared any much better than the public schools or roads or everything else. What we need to do, I think, is bring our schools into the 21st century. You have kids that when they leave school are on their video games, their phones, the computers, laptops, whatever, and then they come into school and they're listening to a teacher for 4 to 6 hours. We need to improve the schools, not divert the funds to different places. I'm a firm believer in public education because it's the bedrock of our democracy.
Thank you, John. I'll go a step further. Not only is public education the bedrock of our democracy, for decades, or the history of this state, it's been a bedrock of this state having outstanding public educational opportunities for our children, is what Wisconsin has been known for years. I do not support taxpayer dollars going for private institutions. The private institutions are getting more funding per pupil than the public schools are, especially for students with special needs. Public schools get about 16% of the funding to educate a student that has any special needs, and the private schools are getting 100% of what it costs to educate that student. And I might remind everybody that there's no accountability. Public schools or private schools do not have to report to anybody except their shareholders, generally speaking, or their advisory board. But there aren't any requirements about parental involvement or any sort of. So anyway, I am deeply opposed to tax dollars funding private education. Our public schools, if we got a problem with our public schools, let's fix our public schools. That is the key for every student in this state.
Well, I don't think anybody isn't a fan of public education. I have two daughters also who teach in public schools. One is a science teacher and one's a special ed teacher. I think we certainly have to continue to increase funding for our public education and support it any way we can. As far as the vouchers goes, I'm a fan of the vouchers, and I'll tell you why. Because if I am a parent or a grandparent of a student in a failing school, I would like to have the option to pull that child out and put it somewhere where he or she has an option to be successful. And how am I going to pay for that? And I think that's really one of the most important options for any parent or grandparent. So, well, I'm a big supporter of public education, and like you said, I have two daughters who teach, and I want to continue to increase our funding for public education. I also think there is a place for the voucher system.
It's a question directed initially to Ann Groves-Lloyd.
My name is Beth Mayer, and I'm a teacher. And my question, I was going to ask a question about public schools before. Your predecessor caused a lot of divisiveness in our community and all our communities in our district. I would like to know two things too. How you are going to help our schools get back to where they were, educationally wise and funding. And also, what are you going to do to try and repair that divisiveness that has occurred over the last several years in all of our areas? Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. All public schools should be funded. Parents should send their children off to school knowing that their kids are going to be taught by well-trained, well-educated, and fully funded teachers that are earning a decent wage. And we need to do more about attracting teachers to our schools in the first place. There has been wage depression, and teachers are picking up more costs because of state funding for their own classrooms. I find that indefensible, and we need to figure out a way to pay for our public schools. And to pay for our public schools to truly be equal for our students across the state. I forgot the second part of your question.
Just
how to repair the. You know, I think we always need to remind ourselves on all of these issues that we are all here for the same thing. We all want the absolute best education for our children, and they ought to be able to expect that in their neighborhood. So I think getting communities together to get everything out of it except what is best for our students and have those conversations.
Yeah, I think we have work to do on equalizing school funding, and especially to rural school districts. I hear that a lot in the small towns I go to, Beth. So there's no question about it. We have to continue to improve there and equalize things. So not all the money's just going to big school districts. As far as repairing things, I think just supporting the public schools is where we go with that. You know, at our karate school, and I'm sure you're aware of this, when our students promote, we send a sheet to school with a student, and the parent and the school teacher has to sign off on the student promoting, because we don't want the kids just to come to karate and be awesome and then go everywhere else and not be. We want them to be well-rounded individuals at home, and mom and dad have to sign off as well. So we already have a partnership with the school system, and clearly we all have the same thing at heart. We want our students, our young men and women to be the best they can be and give them the best opportunity to succeed in life. No question about it.
can't be a big supporter of public education if it's okay to divert funds. Parents should be involved in their children's education. So if there's a failing school, the parents should be involved, the teachers should be involved. If a school is failing and a parent has a problem, they can talk to a teacher. If they have a problem with the teacher, they can talk to the principal. If they have a problem with the principal, they can talk to the school board. If they have a problem with the school board, they can run for school board. Can't do that in a private school. So to fund schooling, it takes some change. And some of the change is going to be in technological changes. I'm a big fan of the Montessori educational system that allows students to go as fast as they can in a certain subject. And teachers can monitor, and if the child is going too fast in one subject and kind of falling behind in another, they can monitor that through the better use of technology. And the use of technology will also drive costs down and allow teachers to have an ability to supervise more students at one time. To end the divisiveness, that's why I'm running as an independent. I talk to people all across the district that are just tired of Republicans and Democrat parties. In fact, when I'm getting signatures, sometimes all I say is, I'm running as an independent. They say, let me sign. So to end divisiveness, I'm going to upset everybody on every side at one point or another. But you know I'll be doing it for the people in the district, not for a political party, not for a corporation, not for a political action committee.
Next question directed initially to John Plummer. Identify yourself.
Maybe I won't even need this microphone. I have a loud voice. My name is Charles Biddle. I'm from Ryle, Wisconsin. If you have property, you should pay taxes. I don't have a problem with that. But I pay a good amount of school tax. And I understand that that school tax that I pay to the township goes to support the school. But this voucher school came into being, and I'm asking the question, why didn't the taxpayers get a chance to vote on it? And then it was mentioned here that the public schools are failing, and so they started the private school. Well, I could see it failing. For many years, I've had the Laverne Fund and assisting the youth in the Ryle School, and I did it in the Partyville School also. It's called the Laverne Fund. Partyville has gotten enough fundraisers; they are supporting themselves now. But
Question, please.
I would like to know why we didn't get to vote on it. If that's different money, it's taxpayer money apparently going to the schools, and how it happened that it let it slide when you could see it sliding.
Thank you.
Well, I can't tell you why you didn't get a vote on it because I wasn't in office. I will say that I agree with Gene that so much happens at the local level. And I'm a believer of being on the town and county boards that's really so important, and I agree with the school board. I think the schools in Wisconsin are great. Don't get me wrong. I think especially schools in the 42nd Assembly District are very good, and I have a daughter who lives in Ryle. So I think local involvement, whether it's people running for school board, going to the meetings, the school board meetings, and voicing their opinions, getting involved, is really one of the most important things we can do. So I'm a big fan of local involvement, and I think anybody who sees or has concern about their local schools should immediately do that and get involved and see how they can help.
Charles, you voted. You voted through your representative. That's, you know, we didn't vote on Foxconn individually, we don't vote on the voucher schools individually. That's how our democracy works. We send representatives to a state or national capital. They do the voting on these issues for us. So though we individually didn't vote on it, our representatives did. And they decided to put in those type of schools. I don't know if that answers your question, or it's
I don't like it, but it answers.
okay. That's my job.
That's my job.
Thank you. I don't know why we didn't get to vote on it either. I should have mentioned earlier, as an educator myself, and my sister-in-law is a reading recovery ED/LD teacher in Partyville. We talk about issues facing public schools all the time. I will go back to, if we have issues with our public schools, we need to address our public schools, not create a separate and unequal system paid for by taxpayer dollars. If everything is best decided at the local level, the last 7 years have been about removing authority from the local level. There are many ways in which local municipalities have had their choices and options taken away from them because suddenly we are not smart enough at the local level to be able to make these decisions. We should have a say in our educational system. I will say this over and over again. As an educator, I see every day what happens when the light bulb turns on for a student. I see every day that transformation. I see the self-confidence. I see them flourish and go beyond anyone's expectations, and every one of our children deserves that from their local school.
Next question directed first to Gene.
And I'm a trustee
What's the name?
there in the village, Delbert Curtis. My question is, what, as far as these vouchers, what is your idea? Is to stop them? Every time a voucher we have, it takes away from our public schools. You keep taking away, pretty soon, yeah, you're gonna have a problem with schools. They don't have the funding. Also, a second question is, we have a lot of teachers, and I know my wife was a teacher, that are taking money out of their own pocket to pay for stuff. How would you fix this?
You're always going to have dedicated teachers who are going to go into their own pocket. My mom did it, my daughter does it, because teachers care about their kids. They really do. Most of them anyhow. Some they probably don't want in the class.
Shouldn't be.
Well, people are people though. How do you put an end to it? You first have to freeze it and stop letting it expand. And then there's going to be a natural selection in even the voucher schools, because no school is perfect. And when you remove the parents from putting input in, you have a school that's run by the corporate. And one of my problems with the voucher schools is, as I said, if you have a problem with the school, you can go through the teacher, the principal, the school board, whatever. On a voucher school, some of them are run by huge corporations. And you're going to get customer service like you do with the cable company. Point made. So how do you stop it? If the voters want to stop voucher schools, at least we have to start with a freeze and then work, and as some of them start to fail, just let those kids be mainstreamed back into the school. You don't want to disrupt children too much on their educational pursuits.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Yeah, how would we stop it? I agree. We'd freeze it immediately, and then plan for how to best meet students' needs as we phase out the voucher schools. Anytime a student has to change schools, it's a really can be a very traumatic experience. Can also build some resiliency, but it can be incredibly traumatic. We have had 57 voucher schools fail. So these students left their public school and went to a voucher school, planning on that school being there. Whatever the reasons are, but I can guess some of it is accountability in many of these cases, or the standards that they weren't held to. And those students had to change somewhere else. And not everybody has a voucher school in their backyard. So it is not a system that is equally accessible for everyone. That is what our public education exists for. So I would plan to freeze it, phase it out, and divert all that money back into our public schools. I'd also want to see some conversations about having teachers have some supplies and expense funding every year.
Thanks.
Sure.
Well, if there's a movement on deck to expand it, I'm not aware of it. I would not vote to cancel it at this time. I will say that as a small business owner, my question would be, why are people taking their kids somewhere else? That would be a question I would want to know. If I'm losing customers, I would like to know why they're leaving me. Because clearly we have great schools. I have no issues with our public schools. And as I said earlier, we have to continue to fund our schools and increase that funding. My daughters, as well, take money out of their pockets, and I think Gene's right there. I can tell you, my girls are just that way. That's just the way they are. Whether or not they will always be that way, or they just thought, well, I need this or this. But I will say that there's no question that there's a place for it in the state of Wisconsin. But as if there's a movement underway to expand that, I'm not aware of it. You go already.
Oh, thanks, John.
Hmm?
Joe Wells, I live in Lodi. I'm interested in what you think the state government can be doing to mitigate the effects of climate change now and the ongoing effects over the next 30 years.
Where to start? There are lots of things that we can be doing right now. A big one is to be investing in alternative energy sources. The solar farms that are cropping up, the biggest innovation that I'm aware of right now is that battery storage is becoming it has greater capacity now, which means the energy that comes from solar panels, comes from wind turbines, doesn't have to be used immediately. It can be stored, and this is going to make using solar energy and wind energy and other alternative sources of energy that much more practical and easier to fit into our existing grid. We need to be aware of the fact that, well, right here in the city of Lodi, we've been working on a drain pipe for an area and we were talking about putting something in that would address like a 5-year flood or a 10-year flood. And now with what's going on, it's do we do it for a 100-year flood? And we're talking exponentially more expensive as we have to plan for these things. We need heads around the table. We need to use scientific evidence. Climate change is happening. We cannot deny it, and we need to act now to be addressing how to reduce carbon, our carbon footprint, and how to take care of this beautiful, beautiful land that we are responsible for.
Thank you. Well, there's no question we have to continue to work on that. And I know in eastern Columbia County, if you've driven over there lately, you'll notice the wind farm continues to expand, and I think that's a great idea. Solar, I'm seeing a lot more solar on houses. So there's a tremendous movement underway for renewable energy. I also had the opportunity about a month ago to visit the biodigester over in Dane, just south of Dane, that takes cow manure and literally cooks it. It takes the phosphorus out of it, or most of the phosphorus out of it, and then the remaining goes back to the farms for fertilizer. I was surprised, and I'm sure you may be too, to hear there were 42 of those in the state of Wisconsin already. To me, that's another great way to not only work on our environment, but also keep our water clean and our streams clean. So there are a lot of different avenues. Financially, it has to make sense. You know, we have a limited amount of money to spend on all of our projects that we need. We have to prioritize, and I believe this is an area we need to look at as well.
Joe? Bill, I'm sorry. Bill, your question was, what can the state do? Okay? Let's look at some real easy steps the state can do almost immediately. Every light bulb in the state building should be an LED light. Right off the bat, you're saving a bunch of energy. Every vehicle in the state fleet, compressed natural gas. These are things that are done easily, very cost effectively, and show the state leading by example. Other than that, then expand past that, of course, then we have to invest in solar and wind, and you know, if there's enough water flow from some of the rivers, even turbines. So there's a lot of things the state can do, but immediately, to lead by example, the state can do some very easy fixes that would save a ton of money and help the environment at the same time.
Next question directed to John Plummer initially.
Allison C. OP. So in the May 3rd Lodi Enterprise, the local would-be Republican Assembly candidate described the Republican Assembly leader, Robin Ross, and the Wisconsin Republican Party plan in writing to exclusively fund and support John Plummer to the exclusion of all other Republican candidates in the primary and the June election. So several years ago, Republican leader Ross attempted to repeal or fatally cripple Wisconsin's state open records law. As an exclusive Republican and Ross candidate, what is candidate Plummer's stance on Wisconsin's open records law, along with the other?
Well, Allison, thanks for the question. I'm not familiar with that particular legislation that was presented, so I would have to look at it, to be honest with you. Clearly, we have to have transparent government and transparent elections here in the state of Wisconsin. It's who we are. So I would have to look at that, Allison, to give you a more in-depth answer on it.
You know, it's sad that we need an open records law to ask our politicians to be honest with us. It's a shame, it's a crying shame that we even have to be talking about it. Government, other than for security purposes, should be open of who said what, who's promoting what, who's planning what. The government belongs to the people, and the people have a right to know what their government is doing, again, unless it's a national security or state security type of situation. They all should be open meetings, all should be open records, they should have nothing to hide.
Thanks, Jim.
Yes, the open records law has been a key component, well, transparent government has been a key core value of Wisconsin for generations. Growing up, I remember thinking and talking about, we're political junkies in my family, talking about how not transparent they were south of our border. And we took great pride in the fact that we ran a clean government. Proxmire and Kastenmeier, and Proxmire had his Golden Fleece Awards. You know, we had a government that people could trust and could access easily. That has diminished over the last few years, and it's getting harder and harder. I should say it's been easier and easier for folks to meet in private and off the record without public notice, without notes being available to the public, agendas being available to the public. That you're paying for the government, folks. We are all paying for this government. It is our government, and we have every right to know, again, agreed with the security, but every right to know what is happening in our government.
Question directed first to Jean.
Hi, Melissa Card from the City of Lodi. I'd like to know your thoughts about guns and gun control.
Well, the wise guy answer to gun control is exhale slowly while you pull the trigger, but that's a wise guy answer, okay? We have accepted certain restrictions on weapons. We've accepted it. Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, the Walt family, Adelstein, all these billionaires can't build their own atomic bomb. We've accepted that. You can't go down the street in a fully functional tank. We've accepted that. Society's accepted some bit of a restriction on all arms. The problem I see, most people don't understand the purpose of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was put together when the United States did not have a standing army. And the Second Amendment talks about rights, and it also talks about responsibilities. The purpose of the Second Amendment is to have a well-regulated militia. And that's why the right to bear arms is in the Second Amendment. But we've had some restrictions on that. It's not unlimited. And as a society, we have to say, where do we draw the line? We talked so much about schools here. It's not just school safety, folks. It's concert safety, it's mall safety, it's church safety, it's walking down the street safety. So when you look at the Second Amendment, it's rights and responsibilities. And I hear a lot of talk about the rights, not the responsibilities.
Thank you.
But
All I know right now is I don't recognize the country I live in. I worked at UW-Madison for 30 years, and I went through an active shooter training in January. And I walked out of there thinking and telling my colleagues, who tend to be quite a bit younger than I am, if you told me 30 years ago this would be what I was dealing with, I would have laughed in your face. There was no way our society was going to be in this shape. We have to do something. And for me, a little common sense would go a long way. I think universal background checks, regardless of where you get a gun. I think if we're going to have concealed carry, you should absolutely have to go through training in order to do it. Guns ought to be locked up if you have them in your house. But there are broader issues as a society that we need to address. And as far as guns go, I feel like the horses are out of the barn. But that being said, we have to start doing something. Something practical. And most people I talked with a gentleman last week, Hunter, completely agreed with me about all the common sense measures we could put in place.
thanks, Ann.
We'll have one more question from the audience.
No, John's got a...
Oh, I apologize.
Thanks, Melissa. I think we have more of a crime issue than anything. And you know, if you look at the areas that have the strictest gun control, Chicago, New York, you know, Chicago is a bloodbath on a weekly basis. And and taking the rights away from legal gun owners only leaves guns in the hands of the criminals. And I'm pretty sure that if they were going to follow our laws, they would do it already. Australia confiscated all of the guns from all of its citizens a little over a year ago, and the murder rate went up. So clearly we have to do something. We have a safety issue, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure that taking guns away from the legal owners is the answer. My wife has a semi-automatic 20-gauge shotgun that she pheasant hunts with me. People ask her, "Have you shot a pheasant?" She says, "Well, I've shot at a pheasant." But that particular gun is one of the ones that would be illegal under the proposed laws for semi-automatic guns. Who started that?
I think now we're ready for the final question.
Am I first?
You are first.
Oh, thanks.
We're back on track.
Glad someone's
Everything
paying
is okay.
That was a good question. I
And
just
your
wanted-
name, please, miss.
Oh, yeah, my name is Sheila Landsberg, and I live in West Point. And so anyways, but I did want to go back to this earlier idea a little bit about open meetings and open records law, because I worked many years for UW Extension, and then I've been myself a public official, and so I know that getting trained by the local government center of Extension as a public official in open records and open meetings is very important to be a public official. And so I know some of you have already been a public official, and so have you had any training in open records and open meetings law, and do you think that that's important as a elected official?
Yes, I think it's essential. That and a primer on Robert's rules is always quite helpful as well. The city alders attend a Government 101 conference that's, I'm trying to remember who it's put on by. It might be the League of Municipalities. And that is a fantastic day-long workshop for anyone who's going into public service. And they go over open records laws, posting, the whole show, posting agendas, time frame, what you can talk about at meetings. If it's not on the agenda, you can't discuss it. It is really essential 101 information for any elected official. I would certainly hope that something like that exists for us at the state level, because it's obviously a little different when it's the legislature.
Thanks,
John, sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that anybody who's served in public office has had training on that, Sheila. It's incredibly important. And I will tell you that being a member of the town board, there's 5 of us. 3 of us can't even go out and have a beer together because it's illegal. So we just can't be friends. No, I'm kidding. But it's incredibly important. And I've traveled around the district to different town board meetings, and I have to say, I've been very impressed at every single one of them. I mean, they follow the Roberts rules. They're very well run. I think the training overall for public officials is very good in the state of Wisconsin.
Not having been through the training, but I agree with the intent of the training. Again, the government is for the people. The people should be knowing what's going on with their elected officials. Again, unless it's a security issue, everything else should be open. You go to court, there's a transcript of every word that's said. It should be the same in government, again, unless it's a security issue.
That will conclude our question and
answer segment. Thank you for your questions, and we will now proceed with our closing statements in reverse order from our opening statements. So Gene Rubenstein, would you please begin?
All right, Gene Rubenstein. I'm the only independent running, so it's easy to remember that old Irish name, Rubenstein. So, on some issues, I'll come out as a liberal. On some issues, I'll come out as a conservative. No one party has a monopoly on all the good ideas. If it's a good idea from the Republicans, then it's a good idea. If it's a good idea from the Democrats, then it's a good idea. If it's a bad idea from either party, it's a bad idea no matter who proposes it. What I would like to do is serve the people of the 42nd District and find the best answers. Remember one time talking to someone who said they were running and they were asked what makes them good? And they said, well, I'm a good listener. Not only am I a good listener, I think I'm a good questioner too. Because just because someone tells you something doesn't necessarily make it true, or they don't necessarily give you all the facts. So you need to be a good questioner also to be it. I'm an independent, folks. I need as much help as I can get. I don't have the backing of any political action committee. I don't have the backing of a corporation. I don't have the backing of a labor union. I knock on doors and talk to people and hope some of them are going to say yes. And I hope some of you folks today will say yes and tell your friends about me to vote for me and tell them to tell their friends, because I'm going to need a lot of help. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. I hope we've answered your questions. I'm going to hang around for a little bit. If you want to help my campaign, if you have other questions, I'll be hanging around for a while. Thank you so much for your participation tonight.
John goes.
Oh, you mean reverse order. Holy cow, if I'd have been paying attention, I'd have had that. Well, once again, I'd like to thank you for letting me participate in this event tonight. I'd like to thank our amazing moderator, Bill, for doing a great job. As I said at the last forum we had here, I'm not a politician. I'm a guy who drove a truck for 30 years for Kraft, delivering to grocery stores, raised 4 amazing young women. I'm fortunate enough to be the grandfather to 7 amazing little ones. And own a small business here in the city of Lodi, make a payroll, pay my taxes. I'm not a political junkie. I have a Twitter account. I'm not really sure how to use it. So you won't find anything from me on there. I'm a public servant being on the town board. 30 years of sales will teach you a couple things, but one of the most important it will teach you is to listen to people and then be able to work with different people. On the town board, we have people from all political persuasions, even though it's a nonpartisan seat, but we work really well together. We don't always agree on things, but we respect each other and we work well together. And that's what I would like to bring to the state capitol, is the opportunity to be able to listen to all sides, because ultimately our job is to do what's best for our constituents. We work for you. The voters send us to Madison. You are our employers. Our job is to best represent you to the best of our ability. So I'm not an extremist one way or the other. I'm able to work with other people from all different viewpoints, and I think, once again, great ideas do come from both sides. And I hear that a lot at the doors. People are tired of the fighting. They're sick of the bickering. They want somebody that will work for them and can get along with other people, who doesn't have extreme views and is willing to go and represent them in Madison. And I would love to be that person. Thank you.
I'd like to add my thanks to Jan and Bill and everybody who's made tonight possible. Thank all of you for your time again. I'm running because I've led a life of service. The people in this district are my friends and my family and people I've known since I was born. I've been knocking doors as well. People are hurting. People who don't have a lot have lost a lot. And people are struggling paycheck to paycheck. They're having to make difficult decisions. And my life experience has brought me to this moment. I have been a public servant. I've been an educator. I've worked in nonprofits. I've been a leader in multiple organizations. I have worked with people in so many capacities that what I believe in is humanity. And what takes me to the Capitol is we need a little bit more humanity. We need our government doing what government can do, and that's be a tremendous force for good in our lives. And I want to bring my life experience, and I want to bring your concerns to the state capitol. And we have a lot of work to do. We have some very serious issues to address, and I want to make sure that we are leaving our children and grandchildren a legacy that we can be proud of. And that's why I would love to be the representative for the 42nd District. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Ann Groves Lloyd, to John Plummer, and to Gene Rubenstein, our Irish friend on the end. This has been an excellent forum, and we want to thank Mr. Breinigvinz for all your cooperation. We typically have students here participating with us, so we're grateful to do this. And again, thanks to our friends from the media for joining us tonight, and thanks to everybody else, and have a good evening.